Am I going to give God a return on his investment with his money that he's entrusted me with? Or am I going to give just enough so that I don't feel guilty when I walk into Blue Ridge on Sunday morning? How am I going to deal with God's money and God's possessions? You know, God has given me some of his possessions so that I can enjoy them, but for whatever reason, I begin to make those possessions my primary focus. Okay? And basically those possessions end up being my assembly line and my idol factory, right? The human heart is an idol factory. And I take those possessions and I put them on that assembly line. I focus on them. I don't focus on God. Those things become my God. Those things become my idol. So that was just a big shift for me. And another thing that I'm realizing is with this time, money, talents, possessions is if we really are God-focused and God-centered, and if we really are faithful, we should leave a paper trail, so to speak. We should have, people should be able to come behind us and look at those areas in our lives and see a difference than the rest of the world. And if they don't, you know, I have to say to myself, well, you know, you might be deceiving your friends, you might be deceiving your family, you might even be deceiving yourself, but you're not deceiving God. God knows. So if we really are living faithful lives, if we are really living lives which are God-centered and God-focused, there should be a difference in our lives in lots of areas than the rest of the world. And if there isn't, as Woody would say, we need to check our whole punch card. So what does the Bible say about being focused? And this is one of my favorite verses. This is Paul, and he's talking about what he's focused on and how he filters the world through that focus. And what he says, "No, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Christ Jesus, is calling us." And I love this because Paul talks about what his focus is, and that is the end of the race. So Paul's not just focusing on God. Paul's focusing on standing before God. Paul's talking about the day whenever he stands before God. He's talking about the day when he has to give an account for his life. And I stop and think about, if I actually did that, if I actually made that my one focus like Paul did, what kind of effects would that have on my life? I talked about in the beginning, you know, we all struggle with, and we sit around these tables and we talk about, I'm not taking enough time to read my Bible. I can't find enough time to do that. I'm not taking enough time. I can't find any quiet time to get alone and spend time with God. I got to be honest. If I was really living my life focused on the finish line and what I'm going to really say when I stand before God, I don't think those would be issues for me anymore. I think that I would find the time to do those things. I think that I would find the time to pray. If I was really focused on the finish line like Paul was, I think that would be the case. You know, we talked about showing up to community and investing in other people. I think if I was really focused on the finish line and what was really going to matter when I stand before God, I think that would happen. I just finished reading a book from Andy Stanley. It's Next Generation Leaders. And he said, you know, in your walk with God, success is not just crossing the finish line. Success is succession. That is, how many people that you came into contact along the way and spent your life with, how many of those people are going to cross the finish line? And when you're focusing on the finish line and you're filtering your life through that, I think things like investing in other people, showing up to community, serving, those things happen naturally. And finally, Woody talked a lot about yesterday about character and the significance of character. And I thought about this, I thought about my own character, and I said, you know, Will, if you're really focused on what you're going to feel like, what you're going to say when you stand before God, I think you're going to have a character which, a lot more than it does right now, reflects the character of Jesus Christ. Because if I'm focused on that finish line, I'm constantly going to be reminded of why it is that I can see the finish line and why it is that I have the right to cross that finish line. And it has nothing to do with anything that I've done and everything to do with what's been done for me. So, questions for tonight? If I can find one here. Now, both these questions, guys, we're going to do them through time, talents, abilities, and money and possessions. Those four categories. And I want you to look through it through the categories like we talked about. It's not your time, it's not your money. It's God's time, God's money, God's possessions, God's talents and abilities. So the first question, describe from the 4 areas above where you are being faithful to God. Describe where you think you're doing a pretty good job in these areas. And how has your focus and faithfulness in these areas changed your life? So there was a time whenever you made a shift and you started focusing in these areas, becoming more faithful in these areas. What effect did that have on your life? Did it move you closer to God? Did it improve your marriage? Did it free you from certain things? Talk about that. And then the second one is, describe where in your life you could be more faithful. What is keeping you from moving? What is your next action step? And then pray for each other in that. Okay? As always, leave the religious junk in the parking lot. 1, 2, 3, go.